Welcome to part three. Julian, who would you say is a big star now in America as regards boxing? Who are big guns?
That's a great question. I mean, you think, don't you, that obviously Crawford and Spence they're the massively celebrated fighters, but I don't know if the big star is the right word. I don't know if they've captured the imagination of the mainstream. I think Ryan Garcia was kind of heading that way, and then he had that little bit of time off, and he had the wobble, didn't he? I think if Garcia beats Tank, if they do fight in April, I think that'll be a breakthrough fight for him. And again, I don't know if the Shakur Stevensons of this world are stars. It's such a tough question you've asked me there, Russell, because the big names or the best fighters in the world right now aren't necessarily the Americans, are they? We've got Tyson Fury, we've got Canelo, Mexican, we've got Bivol, we've got Beterbiev and Usyk, and I just don't know if Americans have got a massive crossover star right now in the US. I think Deontay Wilder's gone a little bit quiet after his knockout, but Wilder's still a big name in the States, isn't he? Even though he's been hammered a couple of times. I really don't know, because the Charlos and that, they're not stars. They might be good fighters and kind of formidable champions, but they're not stars. I don't know if Amanda Serrano you would class as. Good question. Really, really good question. I would say
he's not got a belt.
No, I would probably say. I'd probably say Crawford and Spence are the more of the celebrated fighters of the Americans right now. But the days of the big stars being the Holyfields, the Ray Leonards, the Marvin Haglers, those days are long gone, mate.
Yeah. What do you think about the Manny Pacquiao Conor Benn talks?
Well, what I will tell you was I saw something about it recently. I thought it was a joke. I thought they having an exhibition or something. Because we saw Pacquiao's last fight, didn't we? And he looked so old, didn't he? And so slow and so off pace. And I just thought that would be right up Eddie's street, wouldn't it, to fight Manny Pacquiao? But let's be honest, Conor Benn, it's one thing having been a star in Britain. I don't know the answer to this, by the way, but is Conor Benn a global star? He's really not, is he? He's just a fighter who
Is Carl Froch a global international superstar? You say TV, he is, wouldn't you?
I think it's one of those things. There's been a celebrated, brilliant fighter, and then there's been that crossover global star, isn't there? And sometimes it's quite hard to get that reach to the mainstream. I don't know. I don't know who I mean, if you said who's the biggest star in boxing right now, if you'd just said that 12 months ago, there was absolutely little doubt it was Canelo Alvarez, wouldn't you? And I don't even know if Canelo is now. I know he still earns massive money, but he's Canelo has talked about as he was before the Bivol loss, because I think people are thinking a bit of father time, met his match. I don't know. You've asked me a really good question there. I don't know if there are any stars that really transcend the sport, because that's the ultimate definition of a superstar, isn't it? They transcend the sport that they're in, like Ali did.
Do you feel that the Hall of Fame gives you that cemented stamp?
I think it does if it's done properly. I think ultimately, if you really do care about legacy, that's where you want to be, isn't it? You want to be in the Hall of Fame. And they always say, don't they? I always think about coaching, as a coach. I wasn't that well known. But as a coach, when you get really nice comments of the likes of Gallagher, and when I finished from boxing, I think Billy Nelson was the first person to call me. Then Tony Borg called me when I said I was done. And I got a lot of good tweets and stuff off really well-known coaches. The point I'm not talking about myself. The point I'm getting is when you recognize for something you do by your peers, that's almost like that's all the satisfaction you need. You don't need YouTubers and casuals to recognize you for being good at something. So when you're recognized as a great fighter and you're in the Hall of Fame, you ultimately get recognised by your peers, don't you? By people who truly know the sport of boxing. So I think to become a Hall of Fame fighter is so much better than becoming a multimillionaire. I think that's what's important. And you know, your man, he got inducted, didn't he?
Yeah.
And I remember Joe Calzaghe. It was really emotional when Joe Calzaghe was there with his dad, and his dad was literally sobbing when Joe got inducted. And I thought, it's kind of the pinnacle of your career, isn't it? It's like,
Yeah.
no matter what you achieve in boxing or in the music industry or whatever, you're in the Hall of Fame. You're effectively becoming immortal.
Yeah, it's a massive thing, and I'm so pleased for the
Massive, massive.
because I watched him from the beginning, and I've seen something when he fought in them World Championships in Belfast. I thought I'm going to watch him. Just had
I know
that
you get a bit of stick over because you love Carl
get
Froch as
loads,
well.
don't I? Yeah.
Listen, I love Ray Leonard. I don't care what anybody says. He walks on water. Ray Leonard done nothing wrong. When I met him at a celebrity dinner, I'll be honest, I could barely speak. My mouth dropped open. It's like, there's Ray Leonard. I went all gooey, and I was just mesmerised by Ray Leonard. And there's nothing wrong, mate, with you admiring a fighter as much as you do in Carl Froch. But what I will say is anybody who says he doesn't deserve his place in the Hall of Fame is an absolute tool, and they shouldn't be allowed to comment on boxing.
Yeah. My argument with that Calzaghe Froch debate is this, right? It's all about timing, isn't it? Right?
Everything's about timing.
They were wrong ends of the careers, right? Joe Calzaghe, he waited till the last day, the 270th day, 9 months, whatever it is, the last day, and vacated. But the offer, and don't forget, Carl were a mandatory. The offer shouldn't have been options. He shouldn't have had to rematch him and then have another fight on a Warren show. Mick Hennessy didn't put all that money into him. Should have stand him over to Frank Warren. That's not right. He were a mandatory, and you fight your mandatories. He didn't retire. He moved up, didn't he? But he only moved up £5 first time. Well, it was £7, but he only put 5 on. He could have had that weight, but it would have been an harder fight than it would have been fighting them old boys, them last two he fought. Do you know what I mean?
I've always been a fan of Calzaghe, right? Listen, everything's, you've just said timing there, you used the word timing. It's well known when you're at the end of your career, the last thing you need is a lively, young, hungry fighter in front of you. We saw that with Ray Leonard, didn't we? Fighting Hearns again and Duran and all that kind of stuff. You put a Terry Norris in front of him, disaster. A disaster, a guy with reflexes and hunger who wants what you've got. Yeah. Whereas when you get to your end of career, you look at Floyd Mayweather. Yeah. Floyd Mayweather was an all-time great fighter. He's probably one of the 20 best fighters, 30 best fighters who's ever lived. No doubt about it. I won't even argue with anybody who thinks he's one of the top 10 fighters who's ever lived. But Floyd Mayweather got to a stage himself, didn't he? We have Manny Pacquiao, then we had an easier fight with Andre Berto, and then he signed off with Conor McGregor. But what Floyd Mayweather wasn't doing at the back the last 2-3 years of his career, he wasn't fighting those young, hungry upstarts. You just don't do it. Your legs are no longer there. Everything else is there, but your legs are no longer there. Your reflexes are a little bit slowed. So if you're asking me if I think a prime Joe Calzaghe would beat Carl Froch, that's a different question. But if you're asking me, was it a good move for Calzaghe at the back end of his career after a 10-year title reign to fight a young, hungry puncher with an iron chin? Well, it's a stupid move, isn't it? So you were frustrated because you didn't see it, but it's the absolute best move for Joe Calzaghe.
Yeah, well, look at it like this, right? Froch had to fight Pascal, didn't he, for vacant belt, number 1 and number 2 for undefeated Olympian, right?
Smashed each other to bits.
Yeah, look what Pascal went on to achieve. He took Diacono's 0 and Dawson's 0. Dawson were pound for pound, wasn't it, at the time? He took their zeros, went on to win ring belt and WBC light heavyweight. So, Froch took his own, but if Joe had have gone in that position that Pascal were in at that time, that performance he put on against Hopkins, I don't think that'd have been enough against Carl Froch then. I don't think.
No, probably not. Hopkins was, what was Hopkins, 44 or something? I forget.
No, 43.
43. That's old. That's old. That's a long career. Is that? You watch Tyson Fury. Tyson Fury, if he fights Usyk, I'm not saying he's old, he's not, but he's been in boxing a long, long time. What is Tyson Fury now? 34, 35, whatever, 34? Whatever, however old he is, in 2-3 years' time, if Tyson Fury is still unbeaten, he'll sign off with those 2 or 3 big fights against big names. One of them might be Anthony Joshua. What he won't do is he won't start looking for the ripe, young, hungry contenders, because it's just not what you do. And generally, when you look at the history of boxing and you see long-reigning heavyweight champions get beat, it's always at the end of the career, isn't it? I mean, we saw
a young lion, isn't it?
Yeah, we saw Joe Louis, didn't we, get smashed to pieces by Rocky Marciano. We saw Holmes, I know he lost to Spinks, but we saw Holmes get knocked out by Mike Tyson.
We saw Jersey Joe get done, didn't we, by Marciano?
Absolutely, and this is what happens. And you get to the tail end of your career, and it's the young kid, the young upstart, who's just too hot for you and too lively for it. And you don't need it. You can't compete with guys like that. And at that stage, Joe Calzaghe probably couldn't have competed with Froch intensity.
Could you imagine the Froch who fought Butte against the Calzaghe that fought Lacey?
And that's a fight, isn't it? It's boxing porn, isn't it? Something like that. It's
but just that were about 7 years apart, though, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's timing, isn't it? It's just a shame, isn't it?
Calzaghe against Jeff Lacey was absolutely brilliant, and it's really easy for people to then diminish Lacey. But look what Calzaghe did to him. Nobody was saying that before the fight, were they?
No, they weren't. It was a good win for Joe Calzaghe. That.
Very good win.
Big Meech, obviously, he's back on the scene. He's got that Derek James. Not sure if we've covered this before. These American trainers, it seems to be in thing, doesn't it, Julian?
Yeah, look, American trainers are generally really good at inside fighting, for example. They've always had that advantage over us. I always remember when I was an amateur myself, the English traditional style, the chin in the air, the hands high, the Alan Minter style. And I always remember being really turned off by that style and loving the inside work of a Don Curry who could box on a dime, and just fighters of that ilk who, like Terry Norris a little bit later on, brilliant inside fighters. And I always struggled it, and I've always been asking the question. You always hear me talk about fighting at ranges, different 3 ranges, and I've always struggled with why British coaches generally train the long game, and then you get British fighters who, once it gets to the inside game or the mid-range game, struggle massively. And I don't know what that is. I'm not saying overall American coaches are better than the UK coaches. I would just say the more versatile and as I've said, the work more on the inside fighting, and it's just an arena that we're not great at. But they're not going to give much to Anthony Joshua, because let's not start saying that American trainers are the be all and end all. Because if that was the case, then you'd get clean sweeps at the Olympics now, wouldn't you? The US squad are nowhere now when it comes to amateur boxing. They're nowhere at all. And if you look at, as you've just asked me, who are the big American stars? Again, I struggled answering that question. But I do, back to that thing, I do think about for example, the Terence Crawfords and, the Tank Davises. Those guys can fight at distance, mid-range. They can fight in the pocket. And I do wonder what the secret sauce is in those American gyms that we don't quite have. So I can understand Joshua looking for an American trainer, but I don't think it's a coach what Joshua needs. I think it's a little bit of self-belief, maybe a bit of hunger, and maybe a stronger chin as well.
What do you think to that Tank Davis, Julian?
I think he's technically absolutely brilliant. He's one of those guys who's probably going to ruin himself.
He's a hunter, isn't
he? His record is brilliant. His accuracy is pinpoint. He still hasn't got that massive marquee win on his record that he should have had. What is he, 27, 28 now? But he seems to be been around forever, doesn't he? And if he can land this Garcia fight, that's a great fight. If you ask me what I think of him, I'd say this might be a controversial one. I'd say technically he's the best boxer in the world right now. If you think of everything, if you think of his skill set, not purely just defense. You don't judge a guy just on defense. I judge him on his skill set, his speed, his power, his timing, his versatility, his flexibility, his fitness, his endurance, his ring IQ. Ring IQ is a massive thing that you judge people on. If I look at him technically, I would say is the best fighter in the world right now. I once made a comment when I was on Facebook, and me and Ben Doughty did a kind of video about it, and I said technically, I think Floyd Mayweather is the best fighter who's ever lived. I don't think he's the best fighter who's ever lived, but I think technically he's the best fighter who's ever lived. So I think technically Tank Davis is the best fighter in boxing. And before anybody says at the moment, but does that make him the best pound for pound? No, because sometimes you have to have other attributes, don't you? Sometimes, who have you beaten, for example? Exactly. Who have you beaten? You know, how long have you reigned at a certain division? So if you look at Tank, he's not really dominated the divisions he's won belts in, has he? He's just belt hopped like they do. And there are other more established champions, like Beterbiev is an established champion. Bivens obviously just got one defense to his credit, but I think he's brilliant. I think he's absolutely brilliant. Anybody who says Crawford is technically better than Tank Davis, I won't disagree with you. Pound for pound, he doesn't carry the firepower that Davis carries. I won't disagree with you. I'll say Crawford's got better wins on his resume, but when I think as well, Russell, when I say a statement like technically he's probably the best fighter in the world, what I also mean by that is if you're coaching fighters. So when I was coaching fighters, I wouldn't point them to Ray Leonard or Nazim Ahmed or Ali. So if you look at Ray Leonard and Muhammad Ali, two of the greatest fighters who's ever lived, no question about that. But technically they were flawed. You know, there were certain things that Ali did that fighters can't do, but shouldn't do. Ali would throw a shot with one foot on the floor and one foot off the floor. He'd be all over the place. Inside, Ali wasn't the greatest inside fighter. Ray Leonard sometimes stood in a spot too long and let his hands go too long. It could be quite sloppy. He was good defensively, but it wasn't great. But when I look at technical fighters, again, I'm saying if I'm training fighters, will I tell them to look at? If I was training a young amateur as a southpaw, I'd say look at Billy Joe Saunders. What I would never say look at Carl Froch. You know what I mean by that, don't you? I would never say
Carl Froch is there to be hit, isn't it?
Don't watch Carl Froch. If you want some of what Carl Froch has got, heart, balls, and chin, you can't buy that. It's not for sale. It's not going to happen. But if you want to technically learn how to position your hands, watch Tank Davis, watch Shakur Stevenson, watch Lomachenko. Lomachenko's absolutely phenomenal as well. Maybe ever so slightly on the slide, but watch Lomachenko. And it's funny, isn't it, that the fighters I've mentioned, if you look at the greatest fighters in history, technically some of them are quite flawed. You know, I look at Tyson Fury, who they talk about his ring craft, but Fury, technically, Usyk is a better fighter than Fury. But I think Fury has a little bit more to his game. I know I'm talking about it quite a bit. It's a difficult thing to explain when you talk about technical brilliance. So in the 80s, 1985, 1986, I don't think in the 80s there was a technically better fighter than Don Curry. It was absolutely phenomenal. If you watch Don Curry at range, counter-punching, his speed, his defense, how he held his hands, his elbows, how he had the nice wide feet, great balance. Don Curry was absolutely phenomenal technically, but it was beatable because sometimes you get a guy who hits a little bit too hard for you. He's got too many minerals for you, and he just wants it a little bit more.
And that was Lloyd Hunnigan, wasn't it?
That was Lloyd that night, and that was just a magnificent.
That night.
Everybody
said he was unbeatable, didn't they? Curry, didn't they? Americans, didn't they?
Yeah, Don Curry is an amateur. What, 396-4. That's absolutely true. What a lot of people don't realize how good Don Curry was an amateur, because in 1980 the US boycotted the Olympics in Moscow because of the Cold War. So Don Curry didn't go to the Olympics, and obviously the gold medal normally celebrates fighters even more than anything else. And Don Curry didn't get a gold medal in 1980. Had he gone,
he nailed on for it, wasn't he?
Nailed on, he would have got a gold medal. Zero doubt about that. He would have gone and taken it, and he would have been an even bigger star than he was. But Curry, obviously, There were rumours of him struggling with the weight, but people always talk about great wins by British fighters abroad, and there's been some brilliant wins, but I still don't think there's been a better win abroad than Lloyd Hoonigan's win over Don Curry. People talk about John H. Tracy beating Jose Napoles, but I genuinely don't think there's been a better win abroad than Lloyd Hoonigan against Don Curry, because people forget Marvin Hagler was rampant in 1986, but Don Curry was ranked #1 pound for pound by the Ring and KO magazine.
Yeah.
It was seeming
Ray Leonard didn't want any of him, did he?
Nobody wanted any of Don Curry around about that time. And then Lloyd Hoonigan from Bermondsey, England came over and absolutely wrecked him, didn't he?
Absolutely destroyed him.
Brilliant performance. Hoonigan was just one of those fighters who, it was like a meteor, wasn't he? He beat Curry and then he beat Maurice Blocker.
Yeah, I saw him fight that Johnny Bumpus when I was a kid.
Oh, Bumpus was a good fighter. He was himself. He was a Olympian, was Johnny Bumpus, and he was a big amateur star. KO magazine used to rave about Bumpus. He was a WBA light welterweight champion, and he lost to Mad Dog Hatcher, and then he fought Don Curry. So he fought Lloyd Hoonigan, and Hoonigan just wrecked him, didn't he? And then remember when he knocked out Mad Dog Hatcher in the bull ring in Marbella. And anybody who's not seen Lloyd Hoonigan against Mad Dog Hatcher was a good fighter. And Hoonigan wrecked him in about 40 seconds, didn't he? He just absolutely knocked him cold.
There were an era though. Mark Breland were in that era, wasn't
he? Yeah, I met Mark Breland. You know, he was one of my absolute heroes because I followed him in the amateurs more than I followed him in the pros. And 7 times New York Golden Gloves champion, Pan Am American champion, Olympic gold medalist in Los Angeles, 84.
The 84 team.
Oh, Holyfield, Tyrone Biggs.
He was robbed, wasn't he, against Kevin Barry?
Yep, that's right. Meldrick Taylor, Pernell Whitaker, Evander Holyfield.
Hopkins should have been on that team. He ended up in jail, didn't he, in Greaterford?
He did time, didn't he? But it's funny though. They always say, don't they? I know we talk about all sorts of stuff, so I love it. But they always say, which was the best Olympic team ever? Was it the 1976 US squad, or was it the 1984? And it's a toss-up.
Yeah, there were strong Americans from mid-70s to mid-80s, weren't they?
What happened? I mean, they obviously 84. You know, they came away with.
Took up big other sports, didn't they?
I believe it was 9 golds they got in Los Angeles, and then in 88 they still got 4 or 5 golds. Remember, there was Kennedy McKinney, Anthony Hembrick. There was some. Obviously, Ray Mercer, big Ray Mercer got the gold. And there was some, and then it just went, didn't it?
Tyrell Biggs won a gold, didn't he?
That's right. And then they just had, I think from 92, they just had 1 gold. Was it De La Hoya in 92 and then David Reed in 96? I might get that the wrong way around. But
92, yeah.
Something just happened, didn't it, to the US amateur boxing, and it's not great now.
Well, they've got Clarissa Shields now, old Fridge.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, she's
What do you see happening with Joe Parker now?
It's just one of those fighters is a 6 out of 10 at everything, isn't he?
Yeah.
And he'll always be fit and in shape. He'll always be dangerous from like rank number 10 to about number 6. It'll always be like a 50-50 fight. But once he steps it up to that top 5 or 6, there's just a gap between them and him, isn't there? And I mean,
for me, he just stinks out arenas. I call him Stinkinator, mate.
He does. I mean, if you're losing to, I didn't watch his last fight. I heard it was dire. I didn't watch that show. But if you're losing to Del Boy, we have a problem, don't we?
Houston, we have a problem if you're losing to Del Boy with 30.
We have a problem, don't we? And it's one. I mean, getting knocked out by Big Joe, I get that. He's a wrecking machine. But like I said, getting beat by Del Boy, it's a bit of an issue there.
Del Boy's back. He's got Don Charles on scene. He's done a gasket on Monday. How he's going for it?
Is Don Charles back? Don Charles has been hired and dropped more times by Derek Chisora than anything. Honestly, it's unbelievable.
Well, that's what people will do for a pound note, won't they? They just bash themselves off, don't they?
They're not bothered, mate.
That's what it is, isn't it? Could you imagine Peter Fury having to deal with somebody like that?
Peter Fury getting dumped by a fighter and then that fighter coming back saying, Peter, will you train me again? Peter would be like,
Go,
down the road, son, on
oh,
your way.
6 times? Come on.
Fool me once and all that. Yeah, absolutely.
Hey. Where's the next Larry Holmes then?
You know what? I always remember something. First of all, fighters don't fight enough to get 20 title defenses, do they?
No.
And I always remember what Angelo Dundee said. I know someone's going to mention Tyson Fury in the comments, but Angelo Dundee always said, when a heavyweight gets beyond 6'6" and 17 and a half stone, they lose all that coordination and that natural rhythm. And he says, now because people, humans are just growing, we're all growing, as kids are growing, we're all growing, humans are getting so much bigger. Anyone who's bigger, they don't have that dexterity for boxing. So they end up going in the NFL, the NBA, and going into other sports. And some of them are going into mixed martial arts as well. Boxing's no longer that kind of sexy sport, is it? What's going to attract those natural athletic fighters?
It is because you've got same promoters now as we had in '60s, and they're still rinsing fighters.
They're still there, aren't they? And I don't think there'll ever be another truly great heavyweight champion. And anybody who says Tyson Fury, I think he's the best of a gen. I've said it before. Tyson Fury is the best of a generation, and he's probably the best since. You can debate whether you think Klitschko was a better heavyweight or not, because Klitschko was certainly at the tail end of his career when Fury beat him. And let's not say it was the thriller in Manila. It was a pretty.
Tyson's got a long way to go, though, hasn't he, really? Because
Tyson's got 4 or 5 big names in his record before he can join that pantheon of great heavyweight champions, according to people whose feet are on the ground and people who look at things logically. You need longevity. They said that great fighters have longevity, they have great wins, they have great fights, they show adversity. Well, he's been in great fights. He's been in an absolute cracking fight with Wilder. So he's ticked that box. He's ticked the adversity box that he's shown he can recover from really tough positions to rebound and to win fights. So he's done that several times. But has he got that great, resume? No. Has he got that longevity? Not yet. Will he have that? Well, he's not going to get that fighting once or twice a year, is he?
Do you think the critics will say, looking at Tyson's CV, he had a couple lives and deaths with Wilder, Vladimir were an old man, and Steve Cunningham a life and death blown up cruiserweight. There is 4 wins, aren't they, of a world champion? Mike Tyson's got 10, Ali's got, 14 or something? Lennox,
and it's who you beat as well, isn't it? So Ali's got the names.
Vladimir's got 20, hasn't
he? Yeah. And what Tyson's not done, even when he fought Wilder and Klitschko, he was an underdog, but it wasn't massive underdog, was he? Whereas if you look at Ali against Liston, he was 6-1 against. If you look at him against Foreman, he was 3-1 against. So Ali won those. That's also part of a great fighter, Russell, isn't it? You win the fights you're not supposed to win. You're not supposed to win them. When the odds are against you, that's also a great fighter. And you can argue Fury wasn't supposed to beat Klitschko, and I'll accept that. But it was. I don't think it was a massive upset. I gave him a real good chance against Klitschko because of timing and age and all that type of thing. Thought he might get jobbed in Germany. I think give him a decent chance against Wilder the first time, but
they tried to job Fury, didn't they? They took a point off him, didn't they? When
that was a questionable point, wasn't it? But I'm not being hard on Fury. I'm just saying I think because of the situation and the landscape being as it is to now, I think it's actually quite a really difficult thing to become an all-time great. I mean, who would you say from today's crop? So you look at fighters at the time, they always say don't judge your fighter till his career is over. But we knew, didn't we, when we were watching Ray Leonard fight Benitez and Duran? Even that was like when he won, you knew you were watching a great fighter, didn't you? You knew. You're like, that's a great fighter. That guy's going to be an all-time great. There was something.
Fury runs over Usyk, right?
Yeah.
Sure. And Joyce, for me, is up there.
Yeah, he's up there. He's not up there. Because I don't think he's got a Fraser or a Liston or a Foreman.
I think he'll be up there with like a Riddick Bowe level.
I would say I think it's I'll judge him at the end of his career properly. I can only work with what I see now. But
Riddick Bowe beat everybody he fought, didn't he?
Riddick Bowe was just, he was one of those fighters, wasn't he? It was massively frustrating. Like a lot of fighters, he ate himself out of his prime, didn't he? And I didn't love when he put the WBC belt in the bin. And it's like, why didn't you fight?
Finished at 28.
I was shocked. Yeah, he was slurring his words. He was shocked when he had those 2 disqualification wins over Andy Gallotta. He was absolutely shocked to bits, wasn't he? It was like.
What about when he took family across America in his Land Cruiser?
Oh, I know. He got kidnapping and all that kind of stuff. I mean, in fact, it's funny you should mention Bo. Again, he popped up on my metadata on YouTube, and there was him and there's like a little clip of him and Holyfield. It looks quite recent. It's sad, you know, mate. Have you seen Bo lately? He can barely speak.
Dennis seen him at Cayman Islands.
What did he say? Just a giant of a man.
Photo him, yeah, he's a big lump.
Riddick Bowe, his absolute best was brilliant. I mean, all your followers have probably seen Bowe against Holyfield, the first fight. But if you've not seen Riddick Bowe against Evander Holyfield, get that on YouTube.
That's inside fighting, that, isn't it?
Unbelievable inside fighting, unbelievable tactics. You got the legend of Eddie Futch in the corner. It had everything, didn't it? It's just such a phenomenal fight. And Holyfield was brilliant that night, but Riddick Bowe was just a little bit better. And you asked if we'll ever see another Larry Holmes. I don't think we'll ever see another Riddick Bowe, Russell, honestly.
Don't you?
No, I can't see it.
What about It's Big Phrase?
You know what? Fraser Clark is probably I said this to Max before. I think Fraser Clark as a pundit, I just love him. Technically, to watch him is good technically. There's something missing. He's missing the X factor for me. Is Fraser Clark. I don't think he's going to cut it at world level.
No.
There's something missing. What's just, I mentioned previously about great fighters having gears. Yeah. I don't know if Fraser Clark's going to have the gears that he's going to need to be to step up when things get tough. Just like Tyson Fury has the gears. Deontay Wilder has the equalizer. I don't know if he's going to have, when the fight gets tough, I don't know if he's going to have the gears or the equalizer to snatch victory out of the jaws of defeat. I really don't.
No.
But I think he's a gentleman, and I think he's says it as it is, and he's probably one of the best pundits we've got right now. When I listen to Fraser, he's dead honest. When they were serving him up that garbage, he was pretty honest about that, wasn't he?
Yeah. He was, honestly. There were a bit of talk of him, and Max wasn't the last year having it. I mean, God, that wouldn't have gone down so well for Max then, would it?
Yeah, I said to Max, I says, let's not worry about big Fraser, Max.
Now, Max has got other fish to fry.
Max is going to fight at his level, and Max is going to stay in his own lane, and that's absolutely fine.
Dennis flogging him at gym today in Jersey.
He said he had a few tough sessions with Dennis. I hope it's going well. I think he's back now, isn't he? Has he landed back tonight?
Yeah, it's now dawned on Dennis that it's a rebuild job for Max.
What did Dennis think he was getting?
I said, I know somebody who's one-on-one, Den.
Listen, yeah. One thing we know with Max, he'll have a go, won't he? He's got that big, heavy jab on him, hasn't he? It'll
something to work with that jab, isn't there?
Something to work with, because if you've got a nice jab,
he neglects it in his fights, doesn't he?
Yeah, I think it's a confidence thing, and I think confidence comes with experience.
It's really good, his jab.
Yeah, and confidence, like I say, it comes with experience and being comfortable in the ring. You can see the nervous pros when they turn over. And that's what we talk about, the Furies, isn't it? The Tyson Furies, gloves on at 6-year-old, probably. You know what I mean? And it's just like some people are just that used to the boxing side of things. They look comfortable in the ring, and good fighters make it look comfortable. And Max is nervous. If you looked at Max's white-collar career and Max's pro career, I bet he's not had 20 minutes in a ring.
Nobody else was going to give him a chance. He's got his dream now, so
Listen,
I've sorted his dreams out for him. It's up to Max now, isn't
you
it?
can criticize Max, you can criticize anybody you want, but I'll tell anybody, just turn up at a gym, just to walk into a boxing gym, say I want to join a gym, and
And go
just
get that right hand off Max around your ear roll.
yeah, see what you think to that, and see what you think to just going on a bag. And then if a coach says to you, do you want to do a bit of sparring? It takes some doing. It takes some doing, and we can't knock people for that. The YouTubers, the misfits, I hate it, but it still takes some doing.
I feel bad about getting Max to spar Torrance now, you know, in Leeds.
Look, you got to be able to deal with young kids if you're wanting to go pro, mate. It's not all about having your own way.
But he wasn't going to get a softer option there, were he? Light heavyweight, 17,
no.
17-year-old.
I remember when I started training at Keith Tate's, and I was 15, and it was a pro-am gym. There were some good solid pros there, Russell, Charlie Watson, Tony Brown, who beat Johnny Nelson, he was called Peter Brown, James Jaw, a little light welterweight, super featherweight, lightweight. And we used to spar with those guys, and they didn't take the piss, but they're not there to tickle you, and you learn, and that's part of it. So you can't complain about who you spar with. You just got to get in there, and sometimes you take your lumps.
Yeah.
And it's as simple as that. It's the only way you learn to keep your hands up.
I put Max off, so I respect him for that.
He's having a go, mate. I respect him for having a go. And as we've said before, right, sometimes Max is a bit outspoken. If Max ever made it to the next level, we'd get him a bit of media training, wouldn't we? But I'll tell you something, he's a nice kid. And I won't have anybody say he's not. He's a nice lad.
Yeah, he's a nice lad, Max. Team Max.
Once Max is a mate of yours, like he is with you and I, and the same goes for you, he'd do anything for you, wouldn't he?
Yeah, well, I had to out him out at Circles, so he had to go think about this boxing, and now he's back. Max is back.
Max, we're looking forward to seeing what you're going to do.
Max, let's see what you're going to do this year. Don't let us down. Don't you show me up, Max.
And I'll give him a bit of pads. I'll give him a bit of work. And Max, if you can't do that plank, what I ask you to do, and you can't do that press up and burpee set, mate, I'm going to video in it. I'm going to put it on Porky's Corner.
Yeah. We'll put you with that sparring out with Torrance, Max.
We've still got the footage, Max, so it's up to you, buddy.
All right. Well, listen, you take care, Julian. All the best.
Thank you, Russell. Thanks for tonight,
Cheers, mate.
Speak soon, buddy.
All right. Well, that was Julian. So, is this button here? Oh, it's this button here. Well, there you go. After all that. Well, that was Julian. Hope you've enjoyed tonight's episode. I don't know when it's going to be out. But okay. Peace out.